Fear doesn't walk through the door and announce itself. No one is going to step up, meet your eyes, and say, "You intimidate me." They'll never hand you that kind of leverage. Instead, fear wears disguises. It hides behind syrupy politeness, veiled sarcasm, or odd patterns of avoidance that don't quite make sense until you realize what's underneath. Machiavelli understood something that most people still miss. Fear is the purest, most reliable signal of dominance. Admiration doesn't tell you where you stand in the hierarchy. Fear does. It's not the people who openly compliment you who reveal your true place. It's the ones who pretend not to notice you, yet follow every move you make. The ones who hover at the edge of your presence, calibrating themselves to your rhythm without even realizing it. Fear is influence without effort. And if you can detect it early, you can control the dynamic before a single word is exchanged. That's where Machiavelli's early warning radar comes in. A psychological detection system made of subtle tells that expose someone's anxiety around you before they've even admitted it to themselves. Sign number 1. Excessive politeness. On the surface, politeness looks like respect. But true respect is calm, steady, and unforced. Fear, on the other hand, often overcompensates. It's the overpolished smile, the too eager handshake, the laugh at something that wasn't remotely funny. It's nodding along to every statement you make, even when you're not saying anything worth agreeing with. This isn't rapport, it's defensive submission. They're trying to soften you before you've even lifted a blade. Machiavelli would say, "When the bow bends too low, it is not homage. It is fear of the arrow." The test is simple. Disagree with them gently. Question their opinion. If their politeness intensifies instead of breaking, you've found someone operating from self-preservation, not genuine respect. Sign number 2. The glance and retreat. Fear has a signature in the eyes. People who fear you rarely hold your gaze for long, but they can't stop checking if you're watching. They'll look away, then sneak a quick glance back, almost like prey, checking whether the predator has moved. It's not shyness. It's surveillance. If you're in a group, notice what happens when you're not speaking. They'll watch you when they think you're distracted, scanning your face, your posture, your mood, looking for cues to keep themselves safe. Machiavelli might put it this way: he who looks away to avoid the lion, but glances to see if the lion moves, fears being its prey. To test this, hold their gaze calmly, without a smile. If they break it quickly, then look back to check your expression. Moments later, you've confirmed the silent tension. Sign number 3. Preemptive competition. Not all fear makes people retreat. Sometimes, it makes them rush forward to prove they're on your level. They'll brag about their achievements, often out of nowhere. They'll correct you on minor details, not to help, but to establish their own competence. They'll insert themselves into conversations you're leading, steering them just enough to make sure they're not left behind. It's not normal ambition. It's preemptive self-defense. They sense you have an advantage, and their instinct is to close the gap before anyone else notices. Machiavelli loved this behavior because it's a confession in disguise. He who rushes to match your power before you wield it has already admitted he does not possess it. The test: mention something subtle about your work, influence, or experience. Then pause. If they instantly counter with their own equivalent, you're not in casual conversation. You're dealing with fear dressed as equality. Most people only notice fear when it becomes visible, when it explodes into aggression, gossip, or withdrawal. By then, it's too late. You're reacting to damage instead of preventing it. Machiavelli's radar gives you first strike advantage. When you detect fear early, you can decide whether to diffuse it for alliance or let it grow for dominance. Because here's the reality. Fear is the seed of most betrayals. The ones who feel intimidated are often the ones sharpening the knife, not to rise above you, but to pull you down to their level. If you know who fears you, you know where the danger lies. And if you can use that fear strategically, you can turn silent intimidation into leverage without ever showing your hand. Fear in others isn't always a problem to solve. Sometimes it's a currency to spend. Machiavelli didn't just read fear, he weaponized it. Because once you know who secretly fears you, controlling them takes less effort than managing those who feel perfectly at ease around you. Fear changes behavior. It makes people self-censor. It makes them overcompensate. It makes them hesitate. And if you can guide that hesitation, you can shape the entire relationship without appearing to do anything at all. Once you've spotted fear, the next step is to steer it. Fear, when left unguided, becomes unpredictable, like a fire that spreads behind walls where you can't see it. But when you control its oxygen, you control its direction. Machiavelli treated fear signals as a control panel. Each tell, each nervous glance, each overcompensating smile was a lever he could pull to set the tone, shape perceptions, and make his position in the hierarchy unshakable. Tactic Youre 1. Control the pace. When someone fears you, they instinctively match their tempo to yours. They speak after you speak. They move when you move. They pause when you pause. Machiavelli used this like a conductor leading an orchestra. In conversation, he would delay his responses, forcing others to sit in the space between question and answer. In meetings, he'd arrive just late enough to make people feel they were waiting for him. In negotiations, he'd take longer to consider an offer, even if he'd already decided. This did more than show patience. It subtly trained people to operate in reaction mode. And when someone is always reacting, they stop being a threat. They become an orbiting body around your gravitational pull. The unspoken message is, I set the tempo here. You follow. Tactic number 2. Master emotional ambiguity. Fear thrives on uncertainty. If they can't read whether you approve or disapprove, they will tread carefully. Most people ruin this advantage by over-smiling to seem friendly or openly showing irritation when annoyed. Both release the tension. Both give the other person a clear map of how to navigate you. Machiavelli's genius was in holding a calm, neutral face, one that never gave too much away. Small nods instead of big affirmations, pauses that let silence hang in the air, moments where the other person was left wondering, what are they thinking? Did I do something wrong? The more they wonder, the more they self-regulate. And self-regulation is control without force. Tactic number 3. Reward in public, correct in private. If someone fears you, public humiliation will almost always backfire. It turns quiet compliance into public resistance. Machiavelli preferred a different route. In front of others, he'd offer small, strategic praise, highlighting a strength, thanking them for a contribution, making them feel seen in a positive light. This created dependency. They began to crave that approval. When mistakes happened, he addressed them in private, never in front of an audience. This kept the fear intact but contained, turning it into respect instead of resentment. Tactic from number 4. Limit access. Fear magnifies scarcity. The less time and attention they get from you, the more valuable it becomes. and the more carefully they use it. Machiavelli would deliberately keep certain people at a polite distance. He'd delay responses to their requests, decline smaller invitations, but accept larger ones that served his purpose, end conversations first, on his terms. This created a subtle reminder: my attention is earned, not given. And when people feel they have to earn you, they start policing their own behavior to keep you within reach. Tactic number 5. Use strategic vulnerability. Too much fear, left unbalanced, eventually drives people away. That's why Machiavelli occasionally revealed controlled vulnerability. Never enough to weaken his position, but just enough to humanize himself. He might share a harmless personal flaw, admit to a minor mistake, or ask for someone's input on a low-stakes decision. The effect? They still feared him, but now they also trusted him. And fear, when mixed with trust, transforms into loyalty. Tactic number 6. Plant subtle reminders of strength. Fear fades without maintenance. If you let it slip away, you lose the advantage. Machiavelli's solution was to reassert dominance in understated ways, casually referencing past victories, mentioning influential connections, or demonstrating expertise in something they valued. Never boasting, never threatening. Just enough to remind them, without them consciously realizing it, that the balance of power hasn't shifted. The golden rule: never acknowledge their fear. The instant you say, "You seem intimidated," you lose. Why? Because it forces them into one of two dangerous responses. They either deny it and grow defensive, or they push themselves to overcome it out of spite. Both break the quiet control you've built. Machiavelli acted as if the dynamic was simply natural, inevitable, unspoken. The fear remained like a current under calm water, felt, but never named. When you master these tactics, fear stops being a problem you react to. It becomes a tool you wield with precision. Others will spend energy demanding respect with noise and aggression. You'll command it through silence, timing, and psychological weight. Because fear, at its most potent, isn't something you shout into existence. It's something people feel without knowing exactly why. And once you can create that, you can keep a room in your control without lifting your voice or even moving a muscle. Fear is a double-edged weapon. In its contained form, it keeps people in line, submissive, cautious, compliant. But unmanaged, it mutates. And when it mutates, it seeks release. Machiavelli understood that the release is rarely open rebellion. It's quieter. It's subtle. It happens in the shadows, until one day you realize the sabotage has already been set in motion. That's why your early warning radar must detect not just fear itself, but the moment when fear shifts into action against you. Once you see that shift, you have two options: redirect it or remove the person entirely before they strike. Shift. Number 1. From directness to vagueness. At first, someone who fears you might speak with exaggerated politeness, direct, eager, careful. But when fear turns hostile, they often retreat into indirect speech. Suddenly, they're no longer giving straight answers. They start using phrases like, "some people are saying," or "it might not be a good idea," without naming names or details. They hint at problems without identifying them, forcing you to dig for clarity. This isn't shyness. It's testing your awareness while creating deniability. Machiavelli would say, "The tongue that once bent in flattery now bends in shadow." Countermeasure. Call out vagueness with surgical calm. Ask, Who exactly said that? Or, when did this happen? Let's be specific. The moment you force them into directness, you disrupt their ability to work in the dark. Shift number 2. Aligning with your rivals. When fear becomes uncomfortable, people instinctively look for safety. One way they find it is by moving closer to someone who can counterbalance your influence. You'll notice them spending more time with those who oppose you, quoting your rivals in conversation, showing sudden interest in ideas, projects, or causes that sit on the opposite side of your vision. This isn't coincidence, it's insurance. They're building a second master in case they decide to move against you. Machiavelli's Law. When the deer grazes near the wolf's den, it is not there by mistake. Countermeasure. Don't chase them. It signals weakness. Instead, strengthen your position with your loyalists so that defection becomes costly. When they realize leaving you means losing more than they gain, they often crawl back into line. Shift. Number 3. The slow erosion of your image. The most dangerous form of sabotage isn't an open strike. It's a slow, invisible drip of doubt into the minds of others. It looks like harmless jokes at your expense. Accidental, misquoting of your words. Highlighting your small mistakes in front of the right audience. Individually, each act is nothing. Together, over time, they corrode the way people see you. Machiavelli compared it to poisoning a well drop by drop. One drop does nothing, but 1,000 drops will kill. Countermeasure. Look for the pattern, not the incident. A single offhand remark might mean nothing, but repeated small slights, especially aimed at your credibility, are a red flag. At that point, decide whether to rehabilitate them or remove them, who to save, who to cut. You can rehabilitate someone when their fear comes from misunderstanding, not ambition. They haven't acted directly against you. They still seek your approval openly. You remove someone when they've started aligning with rivals. They've engaged in repeated image erosion. They no longer care to earn your favor. Machiavelli was strategic here. Destroying every fearful subordinate was inefficient. It created new enemies. But ignoring a coiled snake was suicide. The silent intervention. When Machiavelli saw fear turning toward sabotage, his preferred move wasn't loud punishment. It was quiet suffocation. He'd limit their access to key information. Cut them out of important decision-making circles. Subtly reassert dominance through influence displays, not threats. Control the narrative so others saw him as fair and measured, making quiet attacks harder to believe. This forced the fearful person into one of two paths: submission through recalibrated respect, or self-exile from lack of influence. Either outcome worked in his favor. Fear itself is not the enemy. Uncontrolled fear is. Managed well, fear is like tension on a bowstring, enough to hold the structure together for years without breaking. Managed poorly, it's like a fire under the floorboards, quiet at first, then catastrophic. The final law: control the climate, not the weather. Machiavelli never tried to predict every storm. That's a fool's game. The weather, individual events, outbursts, betrayals, can't always be stopped. But the climate, the long-term emotional temperature of your circle, that's where the real control lies. Fear, like heat, expands or contracts based on environment. If your leadership style is pure intimidation, fear will swell until it spills over. If your style is pure softness, fear will vanish entirely, and with it, respect. His genius was in blending just enough threat to keep people aware of consequences, with just enough favor to make loyalty profitable. It was never about eliminating fear. It was about balancing it so it remained useful. The paradox of mercy. Machiavelli warned against confusing mercy with weakness. When someone's fear begins to turn poisonous, mercy without recalibration only emboldens them. They'll read it as confirmation that you lack the will to act. True mercy, in his view, meant giving them a path back to loyalty while making the cost of betrayal unmistakably high. That way, even if they disliked you, they'd prefer your rule to the chaos of opposing it. Mercy without teeth is charity. Mercy with consequences is strategy. The invisible throne. The most secure position is not one where no one fears you. It's one where the fear is quiet, contained, and private. You don't want trembling servants who can't think without your permission. You want competent allies who respect your power enough never to test it. And that's the true Machiavellian insight. The greatest rulers aren't feared because they shout, threaten, or punish. They're feared because the idea of crossing them feels unnatural. This isn't done through constant displays of dominance. It's done through an architecture of control so well built that no one remembers a time without it. The silent crown. In the end, power is not about loud victories. It's about the quiet stability that comes from understanding human nature so deeply. You can read the tremor in someone's voice, the shift in their alliances, the weight of their silences. Fear is simply one instrument in your orchestra. Play it too loud, and the music collapses. Play it too soft, and the song loses shape. But in the right balance, it becomes the invisible crown you wear. One no one dares to touch, but everyone feels. And that is how you rule not just their actions, but their instincts.